iRacing quietly introduced a very useful feature that you might not be aware of. Do you sometimes wish you could change the car's handling during a race? Or do you and your teammates have different tastes in car setup and have trouble agreeing on a setup ahead of driver swap team events? Well, now you can make vital adjustments to stuff like the rear wing and the front and rear anti-roll bars during pit stops in certain car classes, including GT3. Now, this isn't a brand new feature, but I missed the memo, so you may have missed it too. So allow me to outline how this ability can be extremely useful in longer races, especially team and enduro events where multiple drivers are going to be using the same car. This is something that could be great news for you and your teammates. Quick 5-second mention to GT Omega for consistent support of the channel. Get 5% off their stuff with code DannyLee. So the ability to adjust the rear wing and ARBs in pit stops can be a tremendous help in many ways. For a long time you could already change things like brake bias, ABS and traction control on the fly, at least if you're not in the fixed setup series. And while these can help out a lot, they can only do so much to change how the car feels overall. Now, with these changes, you can modify the car's general behaviour and almost completely change the way it drives. Let me give you an example. I recently took part in a 2-hour race in the Ferrari GT3. Due to a mild setup mishap when I was getting onto the grid, the car was a little bit nervous and oversteery, as you can see. After an hour of enduring a car that was too loose and unpredictable, I decided that I'd ask for an adjustment at the pit stop. To control the twitchiness, I would add 1 click of rear wing and 1 click of front anti-roll bar. These two things combined should make the car slightly more predictable, maybe at the cost of outright turning power and a little bit of straight line speed, but it should bring the car in line with how I wanted it. Luckily, iRacing actually indicates the effect that each change will make, as you can see here. US means understeer, in other words it will feel safer and more predictable. Whereas OS means oversteer, which basically means it will be looser and turn more easily, which would correct a car that is struggling to turn into corners and feels too safe, but that's not the situation I'm in right now. Lo and behold, after these pit stop adjustments, I was far more comfortable with the behaviour of the car, and I was consistently a few tenths quicker per lap as a result of the added confidence, and my pace didn't drop off as much because the rear tyres weren't sliding around so much. If I didn't know about this pit stop tweak option, the second half of the race would have been just as miserable as the first, so in this instance I was able to change the flavour of the race just by knowing about the pit stop adjustments. So how can this help you out? Well, if you're a solo driver, it's pretty simple to see how the adjustments can come in handy. That's the scenario I just described. So if for some reason the car is just too twitchy or nervous in the first stint, if you feel like you're always having to save the back end of the car and you want it to feel safer after the pit stop, then you could make adjustments at the pit stop to add understeer. I tend to prefer an increase in the rear wing and front ARB, or if the rear wing is already at a maximum, then I might increase the front ARB in the direction of understeer and then reduce rear ARB in the direction of understeer as well. If it's not far off perfect and just needs a little correction, then you might just use 1 click of each. Or if it's particularly tricky, then you might add a couple. The opposite adjustments would apply if you wanted to make the car looser or more eager to turn, but read the notes next to each adjustment. If you're running in a team, however, pit stop adjustments can be a godsend. Imagine if driver 1 likes a twitchier, more responsive car, but driver 2 likes a safer, more predictable car. Instead of having to reach a middle of the road compromise on the setup, which might leave both drivers with a less than ideal car behaviour for their style, you can just have the car adjusted when you pit for a handover, making it perfect for driver 1 and pretty much close to perfect for driver 2. Everyone's happy. In order to get this perfectly right, you would preferably have the tweaks tested and arranged ahead of time by having driver 1 choose their setup that performs best for them, then having driver 2 try that same setup to see what they think of it. If it's too loose, oversteery and unstable for them, they could try adding more rear wing, stiffening the front ARB or loosening the rear ARB. In my opinion, they'd try adjusting it in that order. The opposite would be true if they found the setup too tight or understeery, and the best part is they can just bring it into the pits and have it adjusted there, which also gives you a handy bit of practice making these adjustments on the go. Once driver 2 is happy with their configuration, this might result in the following playbook for the race. Driver 1 likes the setup as is, which uses a rear wing of 5, front ARB of 3 and a rear ARB of 6. Driver 2 prefers that setup but a bit safer, with a rear wing of 7, front ARB of 5, but the rear ARB remains at 6. Before driver 1 pits at the end of their stint, you would line up the adjustments to be made by setting the desired rear wing to 7 and the front ARB to 5, leaving the rear ARB as is. These adjustments would then be carried out at the pit stop, ready for when driver 2 takes the wheel. And when driver 2's stint is done and it's handed back to driver 1, those adjustments can be reversed again, thereby handing the car back in its original trim. It should be obvious by now why this is great for teams. Gone are the days whereby perhaps a less experienced or confident team member has to be handed a car on a knife edge. Gone are the days whereby more confident team members have to compromise on their pace and style just to satisfy a team member that needs a safer car. Now the car can be made safer and more predictable for the people who need it, whilst giving more confident team members the car that suits their speed and style. Of course, just to state the obvious, just because you can make tweaks, it doesn't mean that you have to. If you and your teammates happen to be perfectly happy running the exact same setup with no changes at the pit stop, then great, you struck it lucky. It just helps being aware of what you can do. However, there is a time cost in certain situations. You'll see next to each setting there is a plus 5 second or plus 10 second note. This might lead you into thinking it will cost an additional 5 or 10 seconds overall, but that's not really true as they are done semi-concurrently. So if you're taking on enough fuel, it won't cost you any time. Here's how it works out in my testing. When I take on 90 litres of fuel, nearly a full tank, with no tyres or adjustments, time spent in the pits is 35.8 seconds. When I take on 90 litres, tyres, rear wing, front and rear ARB adjustments, so all the trimmings, time spent in the pits is 35.9 seconds. So absolutely no time is lost taking fresh tyres and doing a full spread of adjustments if needed. If you're brimming the fuel tank, you can do what you like and it won't cost you time. It's on shorter fuel fills that the problem might appear. When I take on 50 litres of fuel, which is around half a tank, with no tyres or adjustments, the pit service time spent is 20.5 seconds. With 50 litres with tyres but no adjustments, time spent is 20.4. With 50 litres with tyres, rear wing and a front ARB adjustment, time spent is 29.7. And with 50 litres with tyres, rear wing, front and rear ARB adjustment, time spent is 29.1. The slight time differences of the tests is likely due to pit box positioning being slightly off or something. When enough fuel is being taken on, there's no time penalty with these adjustments because the pretend mechanics have it all done before the pretend fuel hose comes out. But when it's a partial tank, the adjustments begin to extend the stop, and for each adjustment made, that risk increases. If you're just doing a splash and dash for example, and you're not taking on much fuel, you can probably afford to squeak in a single ARB adjustment, but no more than that. You can test all this in free practice and it's definitely recommended, but the point of this video is to highlight a feature that could really make a difference during longer races and team events, to correct a current handling quirk in the car you're driving, or to hand the car over to a teammate in a configuration much more suited to them, making everyone in the team happier and ultimately improving your results. I hope this was helpful and may it come in handy one day. Cheers again.